craziest thing about AI has been the growth rate, how fast it's been able to improve. The latest model 03 is now the 20th best coder in the world. Well, people say, well, let's just make sure that it's not biased. We're not even the only country developing advanced AI. It's like trying to stop the water from a dam with your hands.
From high school dropout to tech visionary, Jody Glidden didn't follow the traditional playbook. He rewrote it. He co-founded Introhive, a relationship intelligence platform that raised over $135 million and scaled to nearly a $500 million valuation. His superpower? Spotting trends before they go mainstream and building systems that turn connections into revenue.
AI is coming. It will be in its absolute best form that will help us do our jobs, but at some point it will replace our jobs. One of the ways that I've always adapted anyway is by being open to learning, watching videos and studying, reading books. That's going to be a more important skill than ever. If we're expecting we're going to go do college and then we're done learning, you're done.
From Chalk Media, acquired by BlackBerry, to his current role as CEO and founder of Postilize, Jody has consistently built, scaled, and exited industry-shaping companies. This isn't just about software, it's about people, relationships, and the AI that drives them. Jody's building more than a business. He's building the future of how we connect.
So many people have a hard time with focus. If you just have a plan and focus, you're going to be so far ahead of most of the people. You don't have to be faster than the bear, you just have to be faster than the people that can.
All right, Jody, so you have built and exited 5 companies, and now generative AI pulled you back into the startup scene, into the startup world. So what is the most mind-blowing, scary capability that you've seen AI be able to do?
Well, I think the craziest thing about AI has been the growth rate of how fast it's been able to improve. Because if I look at like 2 years ago, it was really interesting. It was interesting enough for me to stop what I was doing and jump back in. But I really had no idea it was going to get to the point where it's, the latest model 03 that just dropped last week is now the 20th best coder in the world. And, it's pretty much at a PhD level in terms of it's the first one that can actually do PhD type inventing of new science, for example, right? We just never really thought that anything was going to get there in my lifetime.
So how long has AI been around? Like, what's the time frame? Because I think that most people, listen, it's crazy because it's moving so fast that you have people that have not even touched it. You have people that are dabbling. You have people that are building in it. You have people that are sort of proficient users. And I think that even in the proficient user section of that, the proficient user AI category, I think that people mostly think it's an aggregator of information.
Yeah, I keep hearing this word wrapper.
Yeah, wrapper, right? It's not like thinking of new stuff, or most people don't think that it's thinking of new stuff. So you're saying that in a couple years, we're PhD level where it's actually coming up with its own ideas.
That's correct. Yeah. It used to be able to, for example, sort of look at a bunch of jokes and come up with something along those patterns to create a sort of new joke, but along all the exact same patterns. This is the first model that ever came out with 03, where it can kind of invent an entirely new kind of joke, for example, right? Or it can look at the science along, let's say, some sort of quantum physics and actually come up with a new concept. Or the same thing with DNA medicine. We're going to see new drugs being invented. We're going to see new science happening in rocketry and all this stuff. And now the AI is at the point where it's able to actually improve itself for the first time ever too. So, I think to your point about when did it start, it really was November, December of 2022, which is, we're not even at the 3-year mark.
This is incredibly fast. So, I kick this off by asking, what's the scariest thing that you've seen AI do? And it's not like it's able to do anything too scary or too unnerving yet, but just the pace that it's improving. Yeah. It's like a little bit scary.
I think so. I think a lot lately about the impact on our society, on, our children. not from the ethics point of view. A lot of people talk about the ethics part of it. I think that ship sailed a long time ago. I think
No, explain that though. What do you mean the ethics ship has sailed?
you know, like people say, well, let's just make sure that it's not biased or this or that. But like, we're not the only companies developing AI. Like OpenAI is not the only company doing that. We're not even the only country developing advanced AI. So you can't just, it's like trying to stop like the water from a dam with your hands. It's impossible. So, you know, so AI is coming. It will be in its absolute best form that will help it, you know, help us do our jobs. But at some point, it will replace our jobs. You know, for a while, it will augment us.
Yeah.
And then there will be a point where they won't need us anymore.
So what does that mean then? I mean, right now, I already feel like we're at the point where it's augmenting 3 years in.
Yeah.
And like all technology, I'm assuming it follows some sort of growth curve where very soon it's going to, if it's improving itself, it's going to exponentially get more efficient and more useful. And we're 3 years into it and now it's already augmenting. Is this like another 3 years? Is it already going to be replacing most of the jobs that we do today? Or
I think around the replacing of the jobs thing, there's what can it do? And then there's what will we let it do as a society? So there's government intervention happening in every different country. They have their own angles on it and stuff. And, you know, we've now appointed like an AI czar, David Sachs, and so on to sort of put the US's view on what we're going to do. But I think one of the biggest things I hear people say all the time, well, you know, I go into ChatGPT and it couldn't possibly do my job. Correct. But there's a whole bunch of people building companies out there like mine and, you know, a million others where, you know, it might take us 3 to 5 years to accomplish whatever our goal is, but it will eventually completely do a certain job, whether that job might be customer support, which is kind of already being done now, or maybe the SDR job, which is basically the people that dial and, you know, do the sales, entry level salespeople, right? Yeah. The lead generators. They're taking the most repetitive, easiest jobs. Those ones were getting completed first, and then the more complex jobs will happen next, and so on and so on. And I think that's really what you're seeing. I see sometimes in the forums where people say, the job, you know, I don't see anything super impressive yet other than ChatGPT. It's just you haven't seen it yet.
Do you have you seen it yet? Because you're in this space, you're building in this space. Obviously, you're like super into technology. Your whole life has been building tech companies. So I feel like you're more advanced than the average person who's just messing around on ChatGPT on the weekend. Yeah. So you mentioned 20th best coder in the world, PhD level. I know that there's a lot of talk about agents as well, sort of autonomous agents that can do tasks once you train them. Yeah. So you know it. What's the most advanced thing that it can do right now that would be scary for somebody who's like a knowledge worker?
I mean, it's getting pretty good now at doing all of the high volume, like white collar work. So for example, paralegals in law firms are probably, it's pretty close to being able to do that job now.
And without mistakes.
Without mistakes. And people talk about, I hear often people saying about, well, hallucinations and things like that, but there's ways to mediate hallucinations and, you know, cross-checking and using things like perplexity type algorithms. So people are often talking about it'll never work because of, and then the because of is something that was a 2-year ago problem, you know?
So how are people going to learn or upskill if, you know, technology is completely replacing them? Like, I think this is going to hit people coming out of college and university the hardest immediately, because I don't know where they're going to get jobs anymore.
No, I think that, you know, I have a daughter now that's 16 years old. And I think the most important thing is to be agile. You have to expect that the job market that you're going to enter is not foreseeable right now. And so one of the ways that I've always adapted anyway and is by being open to learning and just constantly, whatever that new thing is, there's always going to be a new thing. And whatever that new thing is, if you're on top of it, not trying to, you know, outsource it to people.
Yeah.
I'm all weekend, all evening, I'm like constantly watching videos and studying and things like that, reading books. Like that's going to be a more important skill than ever, because if we're expecting to, okay, we're going to go to high school, we're going to go to college, and then we're done learning,
Yeah.
you're done.
Yeah. And I think that this is something that people first realized during COVID. Like if they haven't upskilled and they got laid off during COVID, then they tried to get back into the job market and they were just doing the same job for the past, 20 years, and they haven't upskilled, then there was a lot of friction with them getting a new job. Now AI is making it even more difficult for those people. I think that everybody has to start acting like an entrepreneur. That's really it.
That's going to be a trend.
Yeah.
Like I can see now already that the company sizes are shrinking dramatically, right? You're seeing at the big companies like Meta and Google and all these companies are shrinking headcount and still achieving the same.
And exceeding revenue too. And I think there was a thing about Meta just shrunk headcount, exceeded revenue numbers, and people were giving them a hard time. Like, why would you lay people off? I'm like,
what will those people do? Like what?
Yeah, I know,
what
but
they do at Meta or Google when there's
exactly
people are more productive.
And you have to think the company's mandate is to grow the company, grow the revenue, decrease expense.
It's their job.
It's their job.
They're
so
required,
as much as it, it's nice if the company just employs people to employ people. At the end of the day, no company's ever going to act that way. So you have to understand how companies act, and then you conduct yourself accordingly. Basically,
that's the world we live in.
Yeah,
and that's the world our children are going to move into and everything. So I think I've seen it also at the smaller scale, right? Because I've done a lot of companies from zero to, they call it 0 to 1, but these companies from 0 to 100 or several hundred people are now, I think you can build those same kind of companies with fewer heads.
Yeah.
And so if you can, you have to, because the investors will only give you that much money.
So, I mean, you've built several companies. If you look at how you build in 2025 versus how you used to build, what are some of the biggest differences? Like when you first started out, what was like the first company? Because that would have been how many years ago? I don't want to date you. But it was a couple of years ago, right?
Early 90s, yeah. Yeah.
So when you first started that company, what was notably different in how you had to think through getting something from 0 to 1, getting it off the ground, raising money, hiring? I want to paint a picture for how much things have changed and how quickly things have changed.
Yeah. So my first one was like in the early 90s and then the late 90s. And back then, I think it kind of like what we were very cash constrained back then. And in the early 2000s, all of a sudden cash was free. And now it's starting to get more cash constrained again, because investors know that you can do it on less cash. So back then I was doing things like profitably, for example, because that was the only way I knew how.
Crazy idea.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I think now we're moving into, we're still doing the same kind of thing where we're doing a cash constrained, but it's incredible what we're able to get done in a short period of time. In Postilize, my new company, from quarter to quarter, when I go back and show customers or prospects the feature list that we've accomplished with such a small team, it's like blowing people away.
So when you say blown away, what is so impressive? What is it doing? Because not everybody codes, not everybody's in the weeds on this. Everyone hears about like no code, low code.
Right.
But that's all most people ever hear about it. They don't actually know what that means. Yeah. And I don't even think that is even AI.
It's not. Yeah. So that's those things like Bubble and things like that, Flutter. But this is even beyond that. I'm not sure that those are even, I think those are becoming obsolete now, because now you can actually make actual, Java code, Python code, Node.js code. Yeah. Having like not a lot of knowledge. I saw a guy on a podcast. He was one of the business guys at Uber, and he created like a very, very successful app, just him. It's generating.
He was not a technical guy. He was like a business development guy. Yeah.
He has no staff. It's just him. And he taught himself, what nowadays they call vibe coding.
Yeah. Yeah. And he built it. And Is that just as simple as going into Chat GPT and saying, literally, I need to build this app. Can you code it for me? And then taking that code and then hosting it somewhere?
Well,
Or is there
most of the time it's going to get it wrong. It's
Yeah.
going to get it. But if I look at what was happening, say, a year and a half ago, the code that it was producing versus the code that it produces today, there's very few errors versus back then it was, a lot of errors. So that's just continues to get better and better. On top of that, you have you have to have knowledge of, like, the more knowledge you have of coding, the better you're going to be at it.
Because if it's like 90% of the way there, then you can take a look at it, and that's still tons of time saved.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what a lot of the developers are talking about, is that it gets them 90% of the way there.
Yeah.
Although now, with products like Cursor and some of the newer models like O3, I'd say you can get it closer to like 95, 96% there.
In the past, you said that Introhive was going to be your last company before AI came along. So, I mean, I'm laughing because I sit down with so many entrepreneurs, and whenever they say they're done, it's always a lie. Like, it's like 100% of the time a lie.
Yeah.
So what was it about? I mean, I think I know the answer, but I want to hear it from you. Like, what was it about generative AI that was so exciting for you? I know that it's efficient. I know that it can do incredible things. I know that it's the future, but you don't have to work again. So why do you want to build in generative AI and go from 0 to 1 all over again? Like, every time it's like an extra gray hair, right?
Hey, and it's not less painful.
Yeah, I know.
The coding may be easier and all that stuff, but it is for everybody else in the world too.
Yes,
So
exactly.
The
So now,
competition is higher.
exactly, yeah.
No, I would say that yes, I was going to be done, and but I think now what got me are really a couple of things. I'm really worried about our future generations a little bit. So I think that there might only be maybe 3 to 10 more years left to earn before the middle class could be completely wiped out. Because there might be so many blue collar jobs and white collar jobs that are replaced. White collar with the AI that we know now, and blue collar with the robotics and everything that's coming maybe 5 years from now. That I feel like maybe I need to earn more to help with my future generations, my daughter, and all of that.
I can ask ChatGPT for anything. Like, what do I actually have to know? Yeah. I know how to interpret the output of a generative chat tool. Yeah. So what do I actually have to know? Just enough to interpret it and prompt it? Or
well, I think really with all of those, whether it's physics or chemistry or math or coding, what threads through them all is logic.
Yes.
And so the better we all get at logic, then that's an adaptable skill that you'll be able to drop yourself into any environment, learn some domain and make yourself useful. I think like building a company is also a process of logic. Yeah. You have to figure out what should the product be or the service be. You're figuring out, what's the market sizing, what's the competition like, how do you pick a good idea? You have to learn all about how to pick. Yeah. Then you have to figure out, well, how do I persuade an investor? And you learn all about that. But these are all logic problems, right? And so if you don't get the logic skills built up in your early years, you're probably going to struggle later on when, probably like you said, the main job will be building a company. It might be a company of one.
It could be a company of one. And I mean, one of my favorite charts is actually looking at how many people it takes to make $1 million in annual revenue. And if you look at the graph over, a period of time since the 1940s or 50s, they used to say, pretend it was like 50 people. And now to make $1 million, ARR, annual recurring revenue or annual revenue company, it's one person.
Yeah, the guy that I was telling.
And not even just million. It could be several million with a Chrome extension or whatever.
They're predicting, I think Sam Altman might have said this, that but a lot of people have, that they think that they're in the next several years, there's going to be somebody that will make $1 billion company with one person.
Crazy. What would be one of the most important skill sets, entrepreneurial skill sets, that has helped you when you started your first company and is still relevant? 5 companies later.
I think probably relationship building has been the most important thing, because there's a few different hurdles that you have to be able to get through in order to build a successful company, and they're all really hard hurdles. One of them is hiring top talent. If you hire adequate talent, you probably won't make it. And that seems crazy, but that's just the way it is. You have to hire exceptional people, and that's a really, really hard thing to do. Why would an exceptional person quit a very stable job that's high paying and come work at a fragile startup? That's a really hard thing to do. I think the other thing is it's relationships that do that, right? They trust you because they worked with you before. I've always put a lot of work into my investor relationships and making sure that even though I might not be building something at the moment, that I keep those investor relationships alive. And the relationships with my top customers, I make sure that when I get a customer, that I make them feel valued, and that I even keep in touch with them after they're no longer a customer, because they might be a customer the next time, or maybe they can be helpful to each other, you know?
Well, I think that, I mean, your strategy on how you build companies is very smart, because you've always built in the enterprise space. And I think that that's, maybe talk a little bit about how you sort of, again, built 5 companies in the enterprise space, and some of the lessons from there, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs, even after they have that first success, they do have a little bit of shiny object syndrome, and then they just go down a completely different route and they make it harder on themselves than it has to be. And I think that's almost, I think shiny object syndrome is, it almost comes hand in hand with somebody who's curious enough to be an entrepreneur in the first place. But you've done a very good job of, you know, regardless of all the different opportunities in front of you, and when you have a track record like yourself, you have a lot of different opportunities that you can pursue. You've done a really good job of staying hyper-focused on what you know best. And I think that's probably been one of the keys. Obviously there's many, but one of the keys to you being successful repeatedly.
I think it's probably the main reason. Because I got pitched so many times on becoming a co-founder in some consumer startup, or, you know, all these different things. And my answer was always like, sounds like a great idea, but it's not my expertise. I don't know anything about it. And I think you have to admit to yourself, what do you know and what do you not know? And enterprise, the thing about enterprise is I've worked in them enough to know how the marketing departments work, how the finance departments work, how the sales departments work. And I know a lot of people. And, you know, one of the things I always say is there's only 500 of the Fortune 500. So when you know a bunch of those people, it makes your job a lot easier, right?
So talk to me about relationships, because you mentioned a couple of things. So relationships are key. And relationships will probably be even more important in the age of AI, where every other piece of the business is almost commoditized. It's almost like it's simple. And the barrier to entry with technology is going to be lower than ever before. So then what's the X factor that's going to get a company to choose your product versus someone else's?
I see, I would say more and more, the reason that people are losing customers, so customer retention going down, or people not winning a deal, is because in the era of COVID, everybody got used to they can sell by Zoom, and they no longer put the emphasis on relationship. I think you can go ahead and sell by Zoom, but relationship has to really matter. You have to make a point to see, aside from what maybe I'm trying to sell you, is there any other way I can help you? Can I make introductions for you? Can I introduce you to customers? Like, being a helpful person in the world is, it always finds a way to come back to you.
AI is going to remove the human component, right, of building a business. You've found a way to make it enhance the human component to a degree with Postilize. That's kind of how the business works. So I think that that's probably explain how you do that, but I think that's probably a healthier way to look at AI.
Yeah, like I noticed with my own personal, like with my own friendships, that sometimes I would go and I'd be a friend that is really important to me, and I'd realize it's been like, you know, 2 months since we had dinner or that we spoke or whatever, and I just think that's not healthy.
No.
And so a lot of times it's because we all just kind of we try to organize our day, but oftentimes we don't organize our relationships. And how long has it been since we spoke to this person? And you have to be able to do that, measure the relationships, as like kind of scientific as that sounds, measure the relationships, that which are going to be the top relationships that you're going to make sure that you nurture all the time, on a personal and a professional level.
Well, this is how you've built multiple companies, because like you said, even in your downtime when you're not building anything, you're still talking to investors and you're still keeping in touch with your customers that were past customers. And I'm assuming even, you know, you mentioned to make a company successful, you have to attract sort of that, A+ level talent.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that you also keep in touch with the people that have been absolute phenomenal employees and peers over the course of the past 5 companies. So when you build something new, you're trying to bring those people back to work with you.
Yeah. I always made sure that, I'll give you a good example. One of my best salespeople, he wanted to start a new company. He came to me and he's like, hey, I'd love to start a new company or whatever. Instead of saying like giving him a hard time about it, I said, stay with me for 2 years.
Yeah.
I'll get you more involved with, the things of how to raise money, how to get your first customers and all these sorts of things. I will help you become a better founder. Yeah. Just stick with me for 2 years. And he stuck with me for, I think, maybe 4 years. And then he went and started a company. He's now raised, I don't know, 5 million. He's about to raise his next round. He's doing really well. Yeah. So, and then, we talk on a regular basis. It builds loyalty, just being a helpful person. You never know when they might want to join back up and become a co-founder someday.
1000%. Okay. So what Postilize does is I mean, we're all human and we all try, and most of us are trying to maintain our relationships. Yeah. And it's difficult because there's a million different things going on in our lives. And so what it actually does is it helps you maintain relationships at scale using AI to focus on and reach out to the people that are the most important in our lives. Correct?
Yeah. So one of the things it's doing is it's just watching basically who are you emailing with, who are you meeting with regularly, who are you texting with regularly, who are those people, where do they work at the moment, what's going on in their lives. Yeah. And the long-term vision is just helping make sure that you don't miss things that are really important. If somebody, maybe even has a baby and you didn't know it, or somebody gets a promotion, or somebody moves to another company, some of these things are, points in time when you should be showing empathy, you should be showing excitement, you should be engaging with them, you should be taking them out to dinner, you should be, maybe it's a customer opportunity, but if you don't even know that these things are happening, how are you ever going to do that?
If we lean on AI too much and we lean on software and tools too much, then we miss the human component in all our interactions. We were talking even before we pressed record about how media and podcasting, you think it's going to be very important because AI can now write probably better than a lot of people can write. Correct. Meaning that what's going to be the reason you read one person's writing versus a Seth Godin or a Malcolm Gladwell or pick a big author or a James Clear? The reason is because of their name. Yeah. So I think that it's going to be very hard for up and coming writers to build a name just around their written work. And you made this point too, because people can just use AI to write now.
Yeah, I think we're going to see probably 100x written content over the next 3 years.
Yeah.
Which will desensitize everybody to written content. And I think you're going to see an uprising in the value of personality and celebrity and podcasting, things like that. Because, I tune into your show because, you're familiar to me and I know what I'm getting when I watch the show. I know it's going to be you and I know the kinds of things you're going to do. That I think is going to be one of the last replaced things in this new world is like personality.
When you think about how to use AI for human interaction in a business context, even before AI, what I used to do when I used to sell, and I used to train sales teams to do this as well, I would tell people to record videos of themselves and send those videos to prospects, like short little 30, 45-second videos on LinkedIn to say 20 of their most perfect ideal customer profile avatars, and do that at the end of every day. And those got a much higher response rate. So even, that was in the era of mass email. And I was trying to sort of stand out in the era of mass email. So now I think it's going to be even more important, because the one thing that, back then before AI, when I was still building companies, with mass email, the thing that could differentiate yourself would be either a video, which we did, or we would research something about the person, manually and include it in the email, something that would make it seem that it's impossible for this to be like a bulk send. Right. But now with AI, even the emails that you're getting, there could be data points that are pulled with AI can do the research and send an email. So you still don't even know if it's actually personalized or if it's something that's just sort of sent at scale, but video could be a differentiator then.
Video could be a differentiator. I also think that there's a continuum of personalization.
Yes, I agree.
So I think we used to have templates, right? So there were companies like SalesLoft and Outreach that they had these templates and you fire out 1,000 today. And then we moved to insert a sentence. So take the template, insert a sentence, right? But now I think there's a potential, and one of the things we're working on is fusing like, what is your personality? Let's say you're a seller. What is it that you are selling? What are the main benefits that you sell? And what's happening in the world with your customer or a list of prospects? Yeah. Fusing those two things together and actually being consultative. So not just, hey, I noticed you tweeted this.
Yeah, which is like the cheapest cop-out of personalization.
Yeah, exactly. But more like, hey, I noticed you went through some, you cut 10% of your staff, and we happen to have this that helps that because of this. Like, that's consultative, right? That's a whole other thing. And I think that is, that's where you just understand, using AI to understand both what's going on with all of your prospects and the right time to contact them so that you won't be annoying.
Yes, correct.
Is really the most important thing.
And this is sort of bleeding edge outreach that you can do right now. So this, I guess I was thinking too far into the future when I said that video is still going to be like the one thing that people feel is truly human. Because at this point, what you're describing, that doesn't really exist yet for most people. Most people don't get this consultative, hyper-personalized email. There will be a point where this is the de facto, where this is what you have to do. Maybe it's in 2 years from now, but right now this is not the norm.
Yeah, and you look at like in the consumer side, this has been happening, right? It's where like I have a conversation, with my girlfriend about, some car, and all of a sudden I start getting ads exactly about that car, right? And so you're like, oh, the right thing at the right time, sure.
Yeah, exactly.
But it hasn't really been happening in enterprise. And so this is what I'm trying to bring.
Which is weird, actually, if you think about it. Like when you're selling to businesses, you're just selling to people.
That's right.
So why do we treat it any differently?
Yeah, well, I think it's because people have always been doing things based on search primarily in enterprise. It's been like, okay, they're searching for this, and then but that's not really how. If you were to hire Deloitte to come in because you're going through a mass layoff and you have some problem, that's not what Deloitte wouldn't just look through your search history, right? They'd analyze your business. They'd look at the SEC filings. They'd look at like what's really been trending in your business, and then they'd be consultative, and then they would come up with some different approaches, and they'd run them by you. And that's what we're trying to work towards.
And you can do that now. Now you can do that without paying Deloitte $100,000.
We're trying to help Deloitte.
Yeah, exactly.
Be able to do more of what they do well. Yes. Really.
So you said that generative AI might be the biggest thing that's happened in your lifetime, our lifetime. What are some other ideas that you believe in how it will transform professional work? So you mentioned robotics. You mentioned that it will also obviously replace some knowledge workers. Are there any other things that it's going to do to our 9 to 5?
I think it's going to completely change our criminal justice system, the judiciary. Yeah. We have humans now that are like looking at cases and trying to understand. Like, remember when what was the FTC looking at how internet was going to be? I forget what that thing was called.
Like a Senate hearing?
No, they were looking at what kind of could Comcast go and just restrict what was going to go over our internet.
Oh, okay.
I forget what that was called. But anyway, then you have judges who know nothing about technical trying to decide on cases like that.
Oh, well, I've seen the Senate hearings about like crypto.
Yeah.
With people that have no idea what crypto is, and even forget crypto. Like when you watch like Zuck or any of these FANG executives or any tech executives sitting in front of the Senate and testifying, And you can just tell that like Senate understands maybe like 5% of what's actually going on in these people's businesses, and they're asking the dumbest questions because again, this is not a political podcast, but they've been in
The world's changing.
the world's changing quickly. And these people have had their, their positions for how many years, and they grew up in a different world, and they are not the subject matter experts. So the questions they ask are actually not that useful because these.
I'm a highly technical person.
Yeah.
I read every day,
Yeah.
and I'm watching podcasts and everything every day. And if I were made a judge right now to decide on a DNA case, I would say I'm unqualified. You know, because that's not my expertise. And that's why I think AI is inevitably going to help assist judges at some point, and then probably at some point be the judge. And I think the same thing will happen with policy decisions. I think in politics right now, you have, politicians making laws. And I think what's going to end up happening is you'll have AI assisting politicians making laws. And then you'll maybe someday have AI being the makers of the laws.
Today's episode is brought to you by Vanta. Now, listen up. This matters for your business. In today's digital landscape, security isn't optional, it's essential. Without it, deals stall, sales cycles stretch on, and scaling becomes very difficult. Now, why? Because investors, customers, and partners all expect businesses to demonstrate strong security practices before they commit. If you can't prove trust, you lose opportunities. So whether you're a startup founder trying to land that first big client or an established company scaling your security program, Vanta helps businesses of all sizes prove that they're trustworthy by automating compliance across 35 frameworks like SOC 2, ISO 27001, and HIPAA, the exact certifications your prospects are demanding. Here's why you need to pay attention. Vanta gives you back precious time that you're currently wasting on compliance. Their platform automates up to 90% of the tedious compliance work. It helps you respond to those endless security questionnaires up to 5 times faster, and it connects you with experts to get your security program running immediately. The results speak for themselves. A recent IDC report found that Vanta customers achieve over $535,000 per year in benefits, and the platform pays for itself in just 3 months. So you're going to join over 10,000 global companies like Atlassian, Cora, and Factory who use Vanta to manage risk and prove security in real time. And don't miss this. For a limited time only, my listeners can get $1,000 off Vanta. That's real money back in your pocket. Visit vanta.com/Scott right now before this offer expires. That is VANTA.com/Scott. Prolon is a success story partner. Now, long weeks and busy weekends can leave everybody feeling depressed and tired. We work nonstop. And that's why I love Prolon's 5-day fasting mimicking diet. I absolutely love this company. Let me explain how it works. Basically, they have a fasting mimicking diet that rejuvenates you from the inside out. They deliver plant-based soups, snacks, and drinks to keep your body in a fasting state while giving you the nutrition you need. And when your body's in a fasting state, this triggers cellular renewal, and it actually works. This is why I've loved intermittent fasting for so many years. This is the magic of Prolon. And the exciting news is they just launched their next gen 5-day program. It has all the benefits they had before, but now they have 100% organic ingredients in all their foods, better taste, and ready to eat meals that make the whole process easier. I tried the original Prolon program. I feel incredible whenever I do it. I personally can't wait to try this new and improved version. And if you've never tried them before, you are in for a treat because the old one was great. I can't even imagine how good this new Prolon 5-day program is going to be. And for a limited time, Prolon is offering Success Story listeners, you guys, 15% off site-wide plus a $40 bonus gift when you subscribe to their 5-day programs. Just go to prolonlife.com/Clary to get your 15% discount and your bonus gift. prolonlife.com/Clary. What do you think if somebody is looking to sort of upskill themselves? What's the you mentioned logic before, but how do you actually develop logic, or what are some other important skills that somebody who is concerned about their job should start to master right now?
I think the most important thing is get in the habit of spending a lot more of your day learning, because most of us spend, an hour or two a day just surfing social media. That's not the best use of time. The best use of time is having a plan. Okay, for this next month, I want to learn about let's say coding on AI, or I want to learn about, chemistry or DNA or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I'm going to, here's my plan, and I'm going to focus on that. So many people have a hard time with focus. And if you just if you just have a plan and focus, you're going to be so far ahead of most of the people. And I don't know if you remember, there was that old joke about, you don't have to be faster than the bear. You just have to be faster than the people that can't can't outrun the bear.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think it's going to be kind of like that. Like, just don't be the one that's lagging behind. As long as you're ahead of everybody else, I think you'll do fine for quite a long time.
You witnessed multiple sort of tech revolutions firsthand. What makes AI different than some other transformative tech that you've worked with or you've seen?
Well, yeah, there's three big notable ones that I can think of. So, first there was internet, right? Because I was using I was using computers to develop software when I was 8, before there was ever internet. And I was like, wow, email, this is crazy. I can send a message and they can receive it. And it did change things a lot. I was working in a company at the time, and we got everybody from using drafting like on paper to like computers, and it made probably a 5 or 10% increase in the amount of bids they could put out in a day. And then mobile came along, and that's when I jumped into creating software for BlackBerry, because I thought, wow, if all of a sudden people have a mobile device in their hand, we could disseminate content to these dispersed work teams and train them quickly. That was maybe, a 5 or 10% improvement on people's productivity. And then, cloud had a small impact on productivity, but I think AI is dramatic. You're seeing people coming in and they're saying, we're laying off 25% of our people now. Imagine what happens 3 years from now. So I think it's people should act right now with urgency, not to stop AI from happening. That's impossible. They should try to act with urgency on learning and building.
What's an aspect? It is actually very interesting. So yes, there is a huge adoption curve. I was just listening to a podcast where OpenAI published that they're getting, I think it was 3 billion searches a month on OpenAI. And interestingly enough, though, which seems like a lot, then Google released, and they have not released this in a very long time, I think since 2016 or something like that, how many searches they're getting, which was, oh my God, I have to find the numbers. It was like 13 billion a day or something like, it was in the trillions per total searches in whatever, 2025. And they only released that number after OpenAI released their number, basically.
Say everything's okay.
Yeah, and they're like saying like, no, listen, like we still run the show over here. Yeah. I'll have to make sure that those numbers are correct, but that was the general takeaway. It's like, so yes, there is massive adoption.
I'd love to see what the curve looks like, though.
I know,
because I bet, I mean, I just know from my own use that I do use Google probably as often as I use ChatGPT. But my results are dramatically better on ChatGPT, and now I have to scroll way down. I just do a simple search today. I searched for Office 365 admin because I was like working on something, and it was like the 6th or 7th result down the page, and the rest was all ads or people gaming the system. And if I ask ChatGPT, it's like,
I've had a couple conversations. So I just looked it up. It's the AI snippet. I don't know if this is accurate, but say I mentioned 13 billion per day. The AI snippet on Google said 8.5 billion per day, around 2 trillion searches. The podcast I listened to, I think, said 3 trillion searches annually, which obviously OpenAI is not even close to this number. It's OpenAI is saying 3 billion per month, whereas Google saying between 8 to 13 billion per day. So massive difference. But you're right. I think that there is going to be, from a business perspective, there's going to be this whole game of trying to figure out how to not only rank on Google and be referenced in that Google AI snippet, but also find a way to get your company as an answer on ChatGPT. And that's going to be the new SEO. And I don't think anybody's figured that out yet, because I've interviewed SEO agency owners that doing between 70 to $100 million in revenue. So obviously they're quite good at what they do, and they're just now trying to figure out like, okay, how do we become the answer? When you ask ChatGPT, how do we become the answer? How does so and so's pizza shop become the answer when you ask, okay, where do I go for pizza in New York? And there's going to be like 10 restaurants there. How do I become one of those? So that's a whole other game that now people have to learn how to play from a business and SEO and marketing perspective.
Yeah. And I'm not sure it's gameable.
I don't know.
It might be slightly influenceable is the way that it feels.
I think influenceable. I think that even SEO in general, I think is less gameable. Like Google's gotten very good at.
I agree. Yeah. But just to your point about the difference in traffic, do you remember Google saying back in maybe the early 2000s when they were saying that they put a lot of effort on taking the amount of time down that it took to get your search results. Yeah. So it used to take maybe a second, and then they got it down to like 0.1 seconds or something. Yeah. And they said that every 0.1 second that they reduced had something like a 10x difference in the amount of traffic that they would get. Yeah, because people hate waiting for answers. So like you look right now, you go into ChatGPT and you ask something, it might take like 10 seconds, right? That's not going to be forever.
No, it's going to be.
That's hardware limitation. That's hardware and power. Right now, we can't produce enough chips to keep up as a nation or as a world, and we can't produce enough power. And both of those problems are going to be solved. There's more chips being created all the time, and now the whole world is moving to micronuclear sites and all this kind of stuff. So power generation that problem is going to go away.
And then that means that, because like right now when I use ChatGPT or Perplexity or Claude, I mean, actually ChatGPT and Perplexity are the two like ones that could do deep research. It does take a little bit of time. Like the deep research component takes, I think, 5, 10, 15, sometimes a little bit longer minutes. But then it's very comprehensive. But I've also found that it's not perfect either. I mean, when I ask it to do deep research on a person, if I'm prepping for a podcast, sometimes it'll find information on the wrong person, same name, stuff like that. Like sometimes I'll ask it to read through documents, and I'll have to ask it like 4 or 5 times to confirm the information that it read in a document that I uploaded. So there's like a lot of, it's good, but like all things, it is still a tool at this point. It is still very much a tool.
And then you look at like O3 that just dropped last week, and even without asking it to do deep research, it kind of does deep research. So your answers sometimes come back in 45 seconds to a minute, and it's went and searched a whole bunch of sources just like deep research did. So we are really just that those times are going to drop dramatically based on the processing power, and the processing power is limited really by chips and power.
When you are now an AI entrepreneur, how do you build a company when the technology is changing so quickly? Because the way that I look at what you're building, it's like if the App Store, like legal guidelines changed every 24 hours, and that's what you have to deal with as an entrepreneur. It seems like, yes, there's an advantage, but you're constantly having to innovate because you're building on top of existing right?
The whole society, really, because like I remember last year, we got surprised with there were going to be a bunch of new Canadian regulations where anything that was AI assisted, you were supposed to put a big stamp on it saying this is AI assisted, which is kind of weird because if I had my actual EA draft something for me or notice something for me, I don't have to put a big stamp on it saying like,
of course not,
my assistant helped me with this. It's kind of, but anyway, you wake up to these things and you're like, whoa, there's a new law and I got to deal with that. So I think the same thing will help us all succeed as entrepreneurs now that helped us stand out 20 years ago as entrepreneurs is speed, agility. If you're working an 8-hour day, you're absolutely not going to make it. You have to go in these bursts of speed when the opportunity is there, and it's unpleasant. But it's the unpleasantness that causes all the competition to fold. So if you can just handle it better than other people and keep that pace, you'll have these crazy laws that will pop up and then get knocked down, and you just have to like bob and weave.
So, you mentioned before it never gets easy. Building a company never gets easy. So now you're building another company. What is the? I mean, it sounds like you're still putting 80 plus hours of work into this per week, like minimum. Like you never really, this is like, there's never an easy way to be a founder. Doesn't matter how many times you do it.
No, this was Easter weekend and we worked all weekend. I did.
Yeah, I feel that. And I think that that's what allows you to be successful. I think that if you look at like some of the most important sort of entrepreneur lessons, it's going to be a ridiculous amount of work for a period of your life. And that's what you have to do.
Yeah, but it's just for the period of time that you're building that company through the hard period. There will be a time like when we got into our 13th, 14th year of Introhive, things got remarkably easier. Yeah, we had a brand, we had all kinds of happy customers. In those early years, there's no shortcut. Like if you can't put that amount of work in, you're better off not even trying and go work at somebody else's company.
Well, that's why I think that like entrepreneurship is not for everyone.
No.
And I don't like that people sell this, this laptop lifestyle entrepreneur bullshit, which is not accurate at all. It's like, it's going to be a lot of hard work. There's nothing passive about it. There's
no work-life balance.
There's no work-life balance.
I've heard this before where people say, how do I do it? I'm on Reddit on the forums, like for Y Combinator and, startups.
Are you ever on Fatfire forums? No. Where it's basically people that want to retire early and never work again.
Yeah.
It's how to structure your life or how to build a company or how to get a job that allows you to retire at a ridiculously like young age. That's the whole premise. But the point is, it's always going to be a lot of work.
Yeah, I think the people that if you go into it expecting to have work-life balance, it's probably not for you. I mean, it isn't for you. And I think people don't like that message because it sounds like people are bragging or whatever, but like there's a reason that almost every entrepreneur you've ever seen in any podcast ever says this. Yeah. It's because it just happens to be the reality of it. It's a lot of hard work. I happen to have a personality, and I think a lot of people do, where it's fun. Like I find it super exciting to wake up and work on it. You could try it, and if you might find it fun too. And there's going to be nights where you can't sleep because you're like, how do I make payroll? That does happen. It's happened to me a bunch of times. Or you thought you had a customer and then you lose them. That happens all the time. But as long as you can find the fun day, the up days are so up.
Yeah, I know.
That it's worth it. That's what gets you through.
If you think about all the lessons that have been sort of instrumental in helping you build all of your companies, what's sort of the most important lesson that you've learned that will help you start something new?
One of the things I found over and over again is that when I hit a wall, usually like several years in, like at Introhive, we had basically zero revenue for 4 years. And probably around year 3, I think most people would have folded up and said, forget it. But I think a lot of the successful startups make it about 1 year after most people would have folded. And I've seen that over and over and over again when I listen to people's stories. So I think that's one of the most important skills you can learn is resilience. And it's really difficult to discern, am I being resilient or am I being irrationally stubborn? And I've seen that one too, where somebody came to me and they said they had no offense if you're listening, they had a startup idea where they were going to do art for students. And it was all around art for students. And I was thinking market size is terrible. These are people that are not going to have a lot of money to spend. You're going to have a really hard time. And they worked at that for a lot of years. And I was thinking, that's the corollary, right? You have to make sure that everything else is in your favor. That competition is fine. Market size is fine. There is a real need for what you're doing. It's just taking a long time. And that happens.
When you're first picking out like a niche or a vertical, now you've again sort of picked out a niche 5 times in a row that has worked out for you. But that first time, for that first time founder, how do you decide what to go into? Because I don't like the advice, follow your passion. I feel like there's much better advice. And I know for a fact, I don't even have to have had known you way back in the 90s when you first started. Enterprise is no one's passion.
I was not passionate about Enterprise learning management systems,
No, I know.
which is what I did.
So how do you pick a vertical when somebody's all the options in the world? What's the advice that you'd give them?
I think you have to do a fair amount of reading about that. There's lots of great stuff out there by Steve Blank, by Eric Ries, by Peter Thiel, and a lot of the great podcasts out there. But the most important things are the things that investors rate you on. So investors always rate you on, if you look up how to build a great investor deck, they always talking about your market sizing, talk about your competition, talk about your competitive moat, talk about the pain of the problem you're solving, like Uber, right? That cabs were horrendous back then. And if you go down that checklist and make sure that you have a big enough problem with a big enough market, with a high enough price point, a low enough competition, and a big enough moat, those are the ones I can think of off the top of my head, then you'll probably be okay.
How do you think about timing when starting a company, both in terms of market readiness, but also sort of personal readiness?
Yeah, good point. So I think that most ideas that you come up with, if they could have been done 3 or 4 years ago, you should stay away from it.
Really? Yeah. You don't believe in being like the Facebook to, the MySpace?
That's a good point too, because I mean, look at Google's another good example of that. They were a couple of years after. If you're going to do that, you have to be a much better version.
Yeah.
You can't just be a copy, because I see an awful lot of people do copies, and that doesn't work.
What about personal readiness? How do you know if you are personally ready to start a company?
I think you have to, if you have any doubt, then it's probably not right. Because anytime I've ever dove in, I never second guessed it. I was 100%. I was like, oh my God, this is a huge opportunity. I can't believe nobody thought of this. Turns out a couple of times people had thought of it. I just didn't know they were building at the same time as me.
Yeah. But every time you felt that much like excitement about what you were building.
Yeah, I used to keep a little notepad before notepads were on our phone. But I used to keep a little notepad, and I'd wake up in the morning sometimes. I'd think, oh, that was a good idea. So I'd write it down. I remember one of them, this was around 2000 or so, it was like students being able to share homework and notes and stuff like that among each other, right? Like a community for students, right? And like I remember one time in around 2008, 2009, I was like, what if enterprises, that sales teams could like talk to each other and everything? And I was like, created this thing, Sales Mason. I was like, this, and then Chatter came out. So like, so yeah, I would keep these big lists of things, and then I kind of like pick away at it a little bit. And then if I got enough conviction on it, I'd be like, okay, go.
And you just lean into it and go. And obviously that first little bit of motivation is fun, but it doesn't last forever. Like, did you carry that amount of energy through the entire building process, or was there something else that you had to figure out that allowed you to keep going when things didn't go so well?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's always kept me going, well, especially in the early years, it was sort of proving people wrong. I had a bit of a chip on my shoulder when I was younger. Yeah, because I came from like a poor, upbringing. I didn't have much money. I didn't have the clothes that all my friends had in school, and it was embarrassing. And I had to try to figure out how to earn my own money and all this kind of stuff. So later on, when people would tell me this startup isn't going to make it, it's a terrible idea or whatever, that would often drive me more. Like I liked that because I could now and later in life, I've chilled out a lot. It's a lot less about that now. It's more like I just love AI. I love what we're doing. But I think you do have to have, and I've seen so many entrepreneurs that have something like that. They have either an extreme drive for money, or they have an extreme chip on their shoulder, or something.
When you're building, stuff doesn't go right. You're not progressing. You can't make payroll. Customer cancels, you get sued, somebody quits, somebody's very important company, they leave. How do you keep that energy? Because I find that very hard.
Well,
even if I love what I'm doing, it's like there's some days I'm like, oh my God, like it seems like the world is ending. I'm not good at that. I think it's a really hard thing to do.
Yeah. I mean, I think I have a bit of fear of failure. I have an irrational belief that I will make it somehow every time. And like to the point where I've written checks like when investors wouldn't. I've done down rounds before and then still came back and then raised it. I remember I did a down round. I won't name the company because I think I'm not allowed to, but I did a down round at 80 cents.
Yeah.
And people say that's the kiss of death. Yeah. And then I just kept on going for a few more years, and we raised it $5 and something a share next time. So, you know, sometimes you have to do things that people say, oh, if you do that, you're done. Yeah. And if you just keep pushing on, as long as you're making progress, and you're still bringing the energy and you're still keeping the great people, you'll be fine usually.
I just want to take a second and thank Cornbread Hemp for supporting today's episode. Now, Cornbread Hemp CBD gummies have been this really nice addition to my wellness toolkit. I don't use them every day, just when I want to unwind after those extra busy weeks, but they're perfect for those moments when you want to take the edge off and just find your balance, really just shut off from work. And what makes them special is how Cornbread Hemp crafts them. They only use the flower of USDA organic hemp plants. That's the best part. For the purest, most potent experience, no fillers, no artificial fluff, just clean, full spectrum goodness in delicious watermelon, berry, and peach flavor. I keep them in my nightstand for those moments when I just need a little extra help relaxing, and I love how transparent they are too. Every batch is third-party lab tested, so you know exactly what you're getting, and they put together a special offer for all Success Story podcast listeners. All listeners can save 30% off their first order. Just head to cornbreadhemp.com/success and use code success at checkout. That's cornbreadhemp.com/success, code success for 30% off your first order of these amazing gummies. FreshBooks is supporting today's episode, and if you've ever wondered how successful entrepreneurs stay on top of their finances while growing their business, the answer is FreshBooks. The numbers don't lie. Over 30 million people have chosen FreshBooks, processing more than 60 billion in invoices and saving an incredible 192 hours every year on accounting tasks. Think about it. That's nearly 8 full days you could get back to focus on what really matters: growing your business. FreshBooks is more than just accounting software. It's your all-in-one financial command center. Create professional estimates, track time, automatically bill clients, and capture expenses on the go. Plus, it integrates seamlessly with over 100 business tools you already use, all backed by award-winning customer service. If you're ready to stop drowning in receipts and you're ready to stop chasing down payments, here's what I want you to do. Head over to freshbooks.com to start your 30-day free trial, no credit card required. And for all you Success Story listeners out there, I've got something special. Get an exclusive 60% off for 6 months when you visit freshbooks.com/pricing-offer. Transform your business with FreshBooks today. That's freshbooks.com/pricing-offer for 60% off. You have an incredible amount of self-belief, which I think is probably one of the most important things.
Yeah, I don't know how that happened exactly, but I do have a lot of like self-belief. I call it irrational self-belief because like I always just go in. Like I read these stats that says like startups have a 90% failure rate, and I just think, yeah, but that won't be me. Like, but it probably should be.
Well, I think, you mentioned this, and I actually love this idea. It's like, the success that you're looking for usually happens 1 year after you quit.
Yeah.
And that's because you've been in it for so long and you've learned so much, and the energy and the effort that you're putting into your company is not matching how the company is doing. So you're like, I'm so knowledgeable, I'm so experienced, we're doing everything right. Why is the company not growing? And that's depressing for a lot of people because most people are, when they're putting in the effort and not getting the output that they think they should be getting, it creates this friction. And that's probably why they quit, because, but know that if they kept going, because they were the experts and they are doing all of the good work that has to be done. If they kept going, eventually the output will match the input.
Yeah, you have to be very clear on what your goals are. Like, what are the steps to getting the first 10 customers? And so if the product isn't resonating, you can't just be doing the same thing. That's the definition of insanity.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to be tweaking things and like, okay, how do I make sure that this resonates? Okay, let's talk to a lot of customers. Let's hone it in. Let's make a plan. But you have to, as long as you're continuing to get closer and closer and closer, by definition, it's going to eventually, it might not be the same product you started with,
but it'll get there eventually.
But it will get there eventually, as long as you can finance your way through it.
That's the thing, right? It's the ability to sort of keep the lights on and keep going and moving in the right direction.
Yeah, but here's a good example. In 2020, we had very little money in the bank. The company was already valued, I don't know, a couple $100 million. And then COVID hit, and our sales went from several sales a week to zero. And it went zero for maybe 6 to 8 weeks. And the investors, the board, they were telling me, they were like saying they wanted me to lay off 40% of the staff. And we had, I don't know, maybe we had 4 months of payroll left.
Really?
Yeah. And it was a massive team. We probably had 200-300 people, something like that. And I remember just thinking, it's going to work itself out. Like we're either going to, we'll get the payroll lowered without reducing the headcount. So I just explained the plan. I was like, I worked out the numbers and I said, okay, I think I cut my pay like 50%. I said, I'll do a 50% pay cut. The next level down, we'll do like maybe a 30% pay cut, 20% pay cut, and so on. The lowest paid people, we wanted to try to work it out that they got no pay cut. Yeah. And then we did do like a 5% layoff. And then we just said, let's do this as long as we do it. The approval rating on Glassdoor and that went to the highest approval rating ever, even though we had given everybody a pay cut. Because everybody was just on board with the plan, and they knew that we were all like, everybody was convicted. They were all like, we are going to make through this. Yeah. And then 1 more quarter, 2 more quarters, something like that, boom, we were back.
How do you, as the founder or the CEO, I mean, how do you get people on board with that much conviction? Because it's always important to get people to believe in the vision and believe in what you're building. But I think that most of the lessons about, hiring the right people and getting them to see your vision, those lessons come from a place of, if things are working and shit isn't hitting the fan, right? Like that's usually, that's very easy. Like you just have to get people on board with his rocket ship. Yeah. When things aren't going well, what's the strategy to make sure that they stick with you?
I think people can feel truth, Yeah. People can suss out if you're kind of like not if you're trying to tell them a story. The thing I've had is I really truly have believed in those points. I was like, we absolutely will. So I was telling the board, I was like here's what I think is going to happen, and here's why what we have is amazing, and here's the downside. If we don't do this, then we're about to lose something that's going to be a new category. And it did become a new category, ERM. So I think I mentioned earlier, I think, about how persuasion is probably one of the most important characteristics. Persuasion and determination are probably some of the most important characteristics of being successful as a founder. And I think that's because it's really, really hard, and people can read the energy from you and the belief from you. And if the customers don't think you believe in your product, they won't buy it. If the investors don't think you believe, they won't invest, and the employees won't stay.
Was that the biggest gamble that you've ever taken?
Probably, yeah, because I mean, that was if I would have taken the 40% cut, we would have been to break even, and then we would have saved the company. And it was a lot of my net worth at the time. Yeah. But I thought we were going to lose the category leader status. And so I was,
and there's going to be a residual, there's going to be sort of this, butterfly effect of lack of trust, maybe harder to attract good talent in the future. Nobody wants to work there because you laid off 40%. So how do you know you're not going to do it again? Yeah. All the signals would have been negative.
Yeah, we were too big for that, I felt like. And so I wanted to, and especially that early in 6 weeks into the pandemic, I was like, we don't really know anything yet. We don't even know what's causing this. We don't know how long it's going to last. We don't know how it's going to affect business. Yeah. In 6 weeks more, we'll probably know a lot more.
If you think about what motivates you, forget financial success. You mentioned like you have a chip on your shoulder. Had a chip on your shoulder. What's the most important motivator for founders? Because I think that financial success yeah, that's what everyone wants to make some money. But I think very quickly you're going to realize when you're building a company that there's easier ways to make money than building a company. I mean, like, yeah,
Go into finance.
Yeah, go into finance, go work for Fang.
Be a hedge fund person.
Yeah, go, like, there's a million ways to make money. So what's the most important motivator for a founder? What should they look for? And if they find it, that's a good indication that they should go build a company around that thing.
I mean, if I were an investor looking at trying to predict successful founders, which I have invested in a handful of startups, and I invested in 6 and 2 of them got quite big. So I think the thing that I look for, I think one of the biggest predictors of failure is somebody who just really wants to be a founder. I think that's like, you can kind of read it off them. They're just like, oh, this is cool. Like,
you want to update the LinkedIn bio.
Yeah. I want to say CEO in there. And actually they'll put CEO instead of putting founder, they'll put CEO. They're at every tech event and all that stuff. I think that's a bad predictor. I think the best ones, and it hasn't always been me, like in the learning management system one, it was, but I think the best ones are when you can tell that they really love what they're building. Like I met a guy the other day who was building a thing for second opinions for cancer. I was like,
what does that mean?
So when you go to a doctor and you get diagnosed with cancer, the doctor usually he'll probably dissuade you from going to get a second opinion, because the second doctor is most likely going to tell you that the first guy screwed up,
Really?
Because they want your business. Everybody wants your business. Cancer is a business in the US.
That seems like that's a really toxic.
It's very toxic. And so this guy was just very passionate about making sure that patients don't get screwed over and that they have a much cheaper and more accurate alternative. And that the first doctor, you could just tell the way he spoke about it, that he really believes in it, and he believes in it for the right reasons. And his work ethic is crazy. Like, I was hearing from him on the weekends and evenings and all this. And I was like, this guy's going to make it. So I'm probably going to invest in a startup. And I've seen that pattern before.
Is it being absolutely passionate about the problem?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think that's fair. I think that's a smart way to gauge whether or not a founder is going to be successful. I think it's also, having a little bit of self-awareness about speaking to founders, having a little bit of self-awareness is about why you're doing this, and are you actually passionate about the problem, or is it a money thing? Is it a status thing?
Yeah. Well, and also, we talked about how it leads to, 2 of the most important things are determination and belief. Well, that kind of gives you both.
Do you feel like people have to put life or dreams on hold to build a company, or is there balance? Is there some version of entrepreneurship where balance is actually, allowed?
Not that I'm aware of. Like, my family have been wanting to go to Japan for the last few years, and I just, for me, I keep saying like I would love to. I love snowboarding. I love everything about Japan. I would love to go, but the amount of time zones away it is, I can't do a 10-day trip to Japan, even if it's a working trip.
Yeah, I know.
So I just don't think it's possible in the early years. Once you get past the B round, you've built a machine. Yeah. Then I think it's okay.
When you have those layers of management and the people that can help you, and when you can actually walk away.
Yeah, because by the time you got to the B round, you know what your sales efficiency metrics are, and you've worked them down as low as possible, and you've got fluidity in the sales machine and the marketing machine. And it's a lot easier at that point.
What's a failure that you've experienced that taught you a very meaningful lesson, maybe something that didn't work out that you haven't shared before?
In high school. So I was, this is pretty crazy. I was always a really good student. I was competing. I came second in the country in math and all this. I was a really good student. But I was I don't want to go to class. So I think I missed something 40 days of school.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot of school.
In 12th grade. And because they had a rule where you could just write the final exam, and if you're and they would take the higher of your exam or your marks all through the year. So I was like, yeah, who cares? I'll just write the exam. The school board met and put in a special rule for, I think it was because of me, saying if you missed more than X number of days, you weren't allowed to graduate. And so I didn't graduate. I mean, eventually I did. What I ended up having to do is go back to, I mean, I tried everything like a founder type personality would. I petitioned the school board and I fought and everything, and I lost. And I was so disappointed. Everybody got to graduate and I didn't. And it was so embarrassing. I was already pre-accepted to college, one of the college that I wanted to go to and everything. I ended up having to frantically do summer school to get all those.
Oh my God.
And I did summer school all summer long, and then I entered, but that was embarrassing and traumatic and everything else.
No, that's such an entrepreneur mindset, trying to game the system, right? Yeah. Oh my God, just skip everything, take the final exam, those marks will count, and then
fine.
You'll be fine.
Wasn't fine.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Do you think people are born entrepreneurs? Or do you think they learn it? Because I always find that entrepreneurs, they always think differently. They always try and like hack this or like do, or, they try and think outside the box all the time. It's like their default operating mode is just outside the box.
Yeah, I've been wondering this a little bit because, the way I was thinking about it is a bit of defiance kind of required. And I think it probably is, because most of the people that I know that have become successful founders, like look at Travis Kalanick, right? At Uber, like there were laws in place that he should not have been able to build that company. And he was just like, we're doing it anyway. He would go into a new jurisdiction and find a way around it. And Airbnb, the same thing. So I think like you have to have a combination, which is a weird combination, but you have to have a combination of defiance and, sometimes rule breaking, but also being organized, an overachiever, have conviction. That doesn't always go together.
No, it's a very unique combination.
And it often ends up with people sometimes not doing well in school, or they doing well in school up to a certain point, and then they drop out of college. You get all these kinds of types, right?
If people, if someone's listening to this, I think you've given a lot of value about what it takes to be a founder, and also just giving people like a really good overview of where we're at with AI right now. But if somebody wants to sort of walk in your, in your steps, in your path, where do you tell people to go research? And to say, we've spoken a lot about upskilling and staying relevant. So what's your recommendation for somebody who wants to stay relevant, doesn't want to be watching Netflix every single night, does want to make sure that they know what's happening in AI, whether or not they want to build a company, or they just don't want to be, replaced in their job? Where do they go?
I think I would start to put together a plan about how, in case of emergency, you could start a business, and probably a technology business. And what are the skill gaps that you're missing right now in order to do that? So what are the business skills I need to know? What are the marketing skills I need to know? What are the sales skills? The coding skills potentially. And a lot of that stuff can come from just watching podcasts, or and then it's going to get into, okay, well, I've got this far, I've got a base of knowledge, now I can go research more on AI, or I can read a book. But I think, one of the things I was really happy that I did early in my career is I grew up through the technical side. Yeah. And then one day I was like, I'm hiring these salespeople, but I don't really know what they're doing every day. Like, I'm watching them do their job, but I've never sat in their shoes. So I had been a 2-time CEO, and I just joined a company and took an entry-level sales job. Because I was like,
I love this.
I want to see what this feels like.
And you just did it, and you learned. And yeah.
And for 4 months, it was horrible. I was getting hung up on and everything, But then eventually, I was like, oh, now I get it. Now, and
now it probably made you a more effective leader that allowed you to set up sales teams better, hire sales better. For sure. I love this idea. This is something that I've spoken about quite often. I think that some of my success has just come from figuring shit out and doing it. Mm-hmm. And even, there isn't really a sales or marketing task, whether or not it's figuring out what subject lines get the highest open rate, or coding up a website, or, figuring out how to identify an ICP and a buyer persona, or I don't know, figuring out how to run a Facebook ad set and optimize like the ads and the creative to get a better ROAS. Like, there's not much that I haven't done at least once. And that, I think, has been a superpower, because then it allows you, first of all, in the 0 to 1 phase, before you have money and before you can delegate, you can get something off the ground, at least to, a very basic level. But also then it helps you hire, because you can tell who's full of shit.
Yeah. And I think some of the worst failures that I've ever had in hiring have been hiring a person too soon. So like, for example, I used to always hire a salesperson, and it would take them forever to learn to sell. And then I realized, no, all the best performing enterprise startups have had a really good founder selling, and it took them a long time, but then eventually when the founder can't sell anymore because you're just busting at the seams, then hire a salesperson, and it's going to be way easier for that person to be successful.
Yeah, because they know what process is, they know what good looks like, they know everything,
all the objections that are going to happen and all that stuff, right? So I think most of our internal instincts are usually, oh, I don't know marketing, I should hire a marketing person. I don't know sales, I should hire a salesperson. And that's usually you're missing such an opportunity. If you like look at all the marketing techniques that you've learned and everything, it's so important to rounding us out. And also, nobody's going to be as passionate about doing a great job at it as the person whose life is on the line.
1000%. And, there could be a chance that you could get a good hire. Or if you screw it up and you don't know how to do it yourself, you
might not even know.
You might not even know. And there's a really good chance if you hire too soon and you make the wrong hire, your company's done. Or it's going to be a very expensive mistake to come back from.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, where can people connect with you? What's the best place for them to? I know you're writing a book. I think it's like the title undisclosed at this point.
Yeah.
But where can people connect with you? Social, LinkedIn, Instagram. Where do you want people to go?
Yeah, probably. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn and Instagram, but mostly LinkedIn. And I try to be on Twitter a little bit, but mostly Jody Glidden at LinkedIn.
Amazing. If you, out of all the things that you've learned, I always like to ask this just to bring it home, but you've learned a lot of different ideas, tactics that have helped you in your life. If you could only pass one of those things on to your kids, one of the most important ideas, what would that idea be and why?
One of the most important things that I've been trying to pass on to my daughter is to have like determination, passion about something, hopefully entrepreneurial. Because I think passion will get you through a lot. It'll get you asking an expert. A lot of what we all learn is conversations like this, right? Like, we talked before the cameras came on and all that. We learn a lot from each other. And I try to ask people questions all the time.
Curiosity, passion, conviction, just care about something.
Yeah, exactly. And that's going to put you ahead of 99% of the people.